The crystal hall of the Varian Empire had never known silence like this. Usually it sang with the soft hum of power flowing through its walls, echoing the pride of an ancient alien civilization. But today it trembled, not from music, but from the weight of anger. The great doors burst open and the alien queen stepped inside. Her tall frame glowing faintly under the silver light of the twin moons, her crown shimmered like frozen lightning, and her voice thundered across the endless hall. "Who dared to touch my daughter?" Her words were not just heard, they were felt. The air cracked. The floor vibrated. Soldiers, diplomats, and servants all froze in place, their eyes wide, their heads lowered. None dared to look at her face. The queen's wings, sharp and elegant, unfolded like blades of light. Her gaze swept across the crowd, fierce, burning, merciless. Every soul in that hall felt the weight of her fury pressing on their hearts. Behind her throne, hidden in the shadow of her mother's rage, stood Princess Soraya, her silver eyes full of fear and sorrow. She wanted to speak, but her voice refused to come. She had known this moment would come sooner or later, because she had broken the oldest law of her kind. She had touched a human, and worse, she had let him touch her back. At the edge of the hall, standing among the guards and envoys, was Ethan Ward, a human messenger sent from Earth to deliver peace treaties between worlds. He was not a warrior nor a prince, just a man of simple heart and steady courage. His uniform was plain, his posture calm. Yet his eyes, clear, blue, and honest, told a story that words could not. He had not meant for this to happen. When he first met Soraya in the royal gardens, she was sitting by the moon fountain alone, her expression empty. He had spoken to her out of kindness, not intention. But kindness, in time, had turned into something far more dangerous: understanding. They had talked under the glowing trees, shared small smiles, and slowly built a bond neither could explain. One day, when Soraya had started to cry, Ethan had reached out and, without thinking, touched her hand. That single gesture had shattered every law of the Varian Empire. Now, standing before her mother's rage, Soraya's heart trembled with guilt and fear. She could not bear to see Ethan punished for something so innocent. But she also knew her mother's fury could burn down worlds. The queen's golden eyes scanned the crowd again, voice rising. "Do none of you have the courage to speak? Must I tear through every mind in this hall to find the one who dared defy me?" No one moved. Even the sound of breathing seemed forbidden, and then a single voice spoke. "Your Majesty." The sound was steady, quiet, but carried through the silence like a spark through dry air. All heads turned. The queen's gaze snapped toward the human messenger, Ethan. He took one slow step forward, his boots echoing softly against the crystal floor. His heart pounded, but he didn't bow. His shoulders were straight, his eyes calm. "I did," he said simply. The hall gasped as if the universe itself had stopped breathing. The queen's wings flared wide, filling the space with blinding light. "You," she hissed. "A human, dared to lay a hand upon my blood?" Ethan met her gaze without flinching. "Yes," he said. "I touched her hand." Because she was crying, because she was alone. The hall fell silent again. Every alien heart waited for the storm that would follow. The queen stared at him, rage burning like a sun behind her eyes. "You will explain yourself," she whispered dangerously, "before I decide whether you live or die." Ethan took a deep breath. "Then I will explain, Your Majesty," he said softly. "But I will not apologize for caring." His words hung in the air like defiance wrapped in truth. The queen's eyes narrowed, her fury unbroken, but something deep in her ancient heart shifted, and somewhere behind the throne, the princess who loved a human silently began to cry. The hall stayed frozen in heavy silence. The moment Ethan spoke, every guard tensed, every servant held their breath, and every alien eye turned toward him. It was as if time itself had stopped to watch what would happen next. The queen's eyes glowed brighter, her fury radiating through the air like a living storm. "You touched her?" she repeated, her voice low but trembling with power. "Do you even understand what that means, human?" Ethan swallowed, but his voice didn't waver. "Yes," he said softly. "It means I cared when no one else did." Gasps echoed through the chamber. To speak like that, to speak honestly, before the Queen of Varia was nearly unthinkable. Yet there he stood, calm, unbroken. The queen stepped down from her throne, her boots clicking against the glassy floor. Each step made the hall tremble. Her long wings dragged behind her like silver fire, and her shadow stretched wide. "You think your emotion gives you the right to break sacred law?" she hissed. "I didn't mean to break anything," Ethan said. "I only meant to comfort someone who was hurting." Her fury cracked for just a second, a flicker of hesitation. But she quickly hid it behind the iron of her pride. "Comfort?" she spat. "You immortal dare to say my daughter needed comfort?" Ethan lifted his head. "Yes," he said. "Because she told me herself." At that, the queen froze. Behind the throne, Princess Soraya's breath caught. She wanted to run to him to protect him, but she knew it would only make things worse. Her fingers clutched her gown tightly as tears welled in her eyes. Ethan continued, his voice steady though his heart raced. "She told me she feels like a bird in a golden cage, that she was born to shine but never to choose, and that every smile she gives the world is a lie." The hall fell quiet again, softer this time, not from fear, but from the weight of his words. Even the guards, who had been trained never to feel, found their eyes shifting uneasily. The queen's gaze hardened. "Enough," she said coldly. "You dare to speak her secrets as if you know her heart." Ethan nodded slowly. "I don't claim to know her heart," he said. "I only know what I saw. A soul trapped by duty who just wanted someone to see her as more than a crown." The queen took another step closer until she stood just a few feet from him. Her height dwarfed his, her aura burned with power, but still Ethan didn't back away. "You speak bravely," she said, her tone quiet but dangerous. "Do you think your courage will save you from the punishment you deserve?" Ethan looked up at her, his blue eyes clear. "No," he said, "but it will save me from regret." Something in those words struck her, like an old wound reopening after centuries of being sealed. For a brief moment her gaze flickered with memory of another time, another face, but then the walls around her heart rose again. "Guards," she ordered, her voice turning to ice. "Take him." The soldiers stepped forward, their armor clinking softly. Soraya's breath broke into a sob, but she covered her mouth, afraid to cry out loud. Ethan didn't resist when rough hands grabbed his arms. He only looked once more toward the princess, his expression soft, full of understanding. As he was dragged away, he called out, his voice echoing through the grand hall. "Your Majesty," he said, "you may take my life, but know this. I would rather die for kindness than live with cruelty." The queen said nothing. She turned away, her eyes unreadable, but her chest felt heavy, heavier than it had in centuries. Soraya fell to her knees as the doors slammed shut behind Ethan. Her mother's fury still burned, but beneath it a strange silence lingered, one that even the queen herself could not explain. Because deep down, somewhere hidden beneath her pride and her crown, a small whisper rose in her heart. One she hadn't heard since she was young, it said, "He spoke truth." Next morning, the palace was darker than usual. Heavy clouds covered the twin suns, casting long shadows through the crystal walls. The air felt heavy, as if the whole empire was holding its breath, waiting for what would happen to the human who had dared to touch the princess. Ethan sat in a quiet cell made of glowing stone. The walls hummed softly, alive with energy. He could feel the pulse of the alien power around him, yet he was not afraid. His hands were bound, his uniform torn, but his eyes remained calm. He knew what he had done, and he knew why. Outside his cell, the guards whispered. No human had ever survived the queen's wrath. The last who offended her had turned to dust with a wave of her hand. But this time something was different. The queen had not killed him instantly. Instead, she had ordered a public judgment. When the hour came, the great doors of the throne hall opened once more. The hall was filled with nobles, soldiers, and witnesses from across the empire. Every eye turned as Ethan was brought forward in chains. The queen sat high upon her crystal throne, her wings folded tightly behind her. Her face was calm now, but her eyes still burned with quiet anger. When Ethan was placed before her, she rose slowly. "Human," she said, her voice echoing through the hall. "You stand accused of breaking the sacred law of contact with royal blood. You touched my daughter. Do you deny this?" Ethan lifted his head. "I do not deny it." Her eyes narrowed. "And do you understand the punishment that follows?" "I do," he said softly. "Death." Gasps spread across the crowd. No one expected him to speak it so calmly. The queen tilted her head slightly, studying him like a strange creature she couldn't understand. "Then why?" she asked. Did you do it? Ethan's voice trembled just a little, but he didn't look away. Because your daughter was lonely. The hall went silent again. He took a deep breath and continued. When I first saw her, she was sitting alone in the gardens. Everyone around her bowed, but no one looked at her. She smiled, but her eyes were empty. I spoke to her not as a princess, but as a person, and for the first time she smiled for real. The queen's expression didn't change, but her hands tightened at her sides. Memories she had buried long ago stirred in her mind. Memories of her own youth before she had become queen, before duty had stolen her freedom. Ethan's voice grew softer. I touched her hand because she was crying, because I couldn't stand to see someone trapped in pain. I didn't think of her crown. I just saw someone who needed kindness. The queen stepped closer, her long robes trailing behind her. Kindness? She repeated bitterly. You speak as if you understand our world. You don't. You are a human, weak, fragile, short-lived. You think your feelings can challenge our laws? Ethan met her gaze. No, he said. But maybe feelings are what your laws forgot. For a heartbeat, there was only silence. Then the queen turned away sharply. Enough, she said. You will face the trial of fire. If your heart is true, the flames will spare you. If not, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. The guards seized Ethan again, pulling him back toward the waiting chamber. He didn't resist. His eyes met Sariah's across the hall. She had been forced to sit among the nobles, her face pale, her eyes full of tears. As the guards dragged him away, he smiled at her, a small, gentle smile, as if to say it's okay. When he disappeared behind the great doors, the queen sat back upon her throne. The crowd slowly began to leave, whispering among themselves. But even as the hall emptied, the queen remained still. Her hands trembled slightly, and her heart, once so strong, so cold, felt strangely heavy. For the first time in centuries, she was not sure if her judgment was right. Night fell over the crystal city of Varia, and the palace glowed faintly under the twin moons. The streets outside were quiet, but inside the royal walls, whispers moved like wind. Everyone spoke of the human who had touched the princess, the one who would face the trial of fire at sunrise. Some called him foolish, others called him brave. But to Princess Sariah, he was neither. He was simply someone who had shown her kindness when the universe had not. She sat alone in her chamber, looking out through the glass walls at the glowing skyline. The stars above shimmered like tears. She couldn't stop thinking about Ethan. His calm voice, his steady eyes, his unshakable courage even before her mother's fury. Every part of her wanted to save him, but she was trapped by the chains of royalty. She was the queen's daughter, and her every step was watched. Even her sorrow was expected to look graceful. But tonight she could not pretend. She stood, her heart pounding, and walked to her mother's chamber. The queen's door was guarded by 2 elite soldiers. When they saw her, they bowed, but their faces showed concern. Your Majesty is resting, one of them said softly. I will see her, Sariah said firmly. Her voice carried royal authority, and the guard stepped aside without question. The door slid open and she entered. The queen stood by the balcony, her silver crown removed, her long hair flowing freely. The moonlight painted her face with soft light, revealing tired eyes that had seen too many battles and made too many hard choices. Mother, Sariah said quietly. The queen turned. You should be asleep, child. I cannot sleep, Sariah said, her voice trembling. Not when you plan to kill an innocent man. The queen's eyes hardened. He broke our law. You know the punishment. Sariah stepped forward, her eyes shining with tears. He broke no law of the heart. You call it forbidden to touch me, but he never hurt me. He never wanted power or fame or anything from me. He only cared. The queen said nothing. She turned her gaze back to the stars. Do you know, Sariah continued softly, that before he came, I never spoke freely to anyone. I was always told what to say, how to act, what to feel. He listened to me, truly listened. He saw me not as a princess, but as a person. The queen's jaw tightened. You are more than a person, Sariah. You are the heir to Varia. You carry the light of our race. You cannot love someone who will die long before you do. Sariah's voice broke. Then maybe I don't want to live forever if I must live alone. Those words cut through the silence like a blade. The queen turned sharply, her eyes wide. For the first time, her daughter's voice had challenged her not with anger, but with truth. Mother, Soraya whispered, stepping closer. You once told me love is weakness. But isn't loneliness worse? He is not a warrior or a king. He's a man who chose kindness even when it could kill him. Isn't that strength? The queen looked at her daughter, the same face she had once seen in her own reflection when she was young and in love, long before the throne had stolen that part of her away. Her lips parted slightly as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, she turned away. You don't understand, Soraya. You will one day. Soraya shook her head. No, mother. It's you who doesn't understand. With tears streaming down her face, the princess left the room. The doors closed behind her with a soft sound that felt heavier than any scream. The queen stood still for a long moment, staring at the night sky. Her heart, so used to command and control, now felt uncertain. For the first time in many years, she remembered what it was to feel. Below, the city lights shimmered like fireflies. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, in a cold stone cell, the human man sat waiting for dawn. And high above, the queen whispered to the stars, her voice trembling, "Why does kindness feel like pain?" The dawn rose slowly over the crystal towers of Varia. The sky burned gold and violet, the twin suns rising like eyes of judgment. The palace bells rang, deep, powerful, ancient. It was the signal for the trial of fire. In the great courtyard, a massive circle of glowing runes had been carved into the marble. At its center stood a pillar of living flame, bright, swirling, alive with strange light. It was said that the fire could see into one's soul. If the heart was pure, it would leave the person unharmed. But if there was any lie, any cruelty, any selfishness, it would consume them completely. The queen sat on her high throne, her armor gleaming, her expression unreadable. Thousands of Varians gathered to watch, filling the steps and balconies that surrounded the courtyard. The air felt heavy with tension and fear. 2 guards brought Ethan Ward forward. His hands were no longer bound, but the marks of the chains still showed on his wrists. He walked calmly, his steps slow but steady. His eyes rose to meet the queen's, not with defiance but with quiet strength. The queen spoke, her voice clear and sharp. Ethan Ward of Earth, you stand accused of breaking the sacred law of contact with royal blood. You touched the Princess Soraya without permission. You claim your act was born of compassion, not defiance. The trial will decide if your heart speaks truth. Ethan nodded once. I understand. The queen raised her hand. The fire in the center of the circle flared higher, its colors shifting from gold to white. The sound it made was not like burning wood. It was like singing, pure and haunting. The guard stepped back. Ethan stood alone before the flame. He turned once, looking up at the balcony where Soraya stood, her hands clasped to her chest. Their eyes met across the distance, a silent exchange of courage and love. She wanted to scream, to beg him not to do it, but her throat refused to move. Ethan smiled softly, just for her. Then he stepped forward. The fire's glow touched his face. Heat washed over him, but he didn't flinch. He took another step, then another, until the flames surrounded him completely. The crowd gasped. The queen's hands clenched the armrest of her throne, her wings twitching. The fire roared higher, wrapping around him like a living creature. His figure disappeared in the light. For a moment, all anyone could see was white, burning, blinding white. Then something strange happened. The flames began to change. The angry orange turned soft, glowing silver and blue. Instead of consuming, the fire flowed around Ethan gently like water. His clothes were untouched. His skin did not burn. He stood in the center, calm, his face lit by the sacred light. The runes beneath his feet shimmered, sending waves of warmth through the courtyard. The fire's song grew softer, almost peaceful, almost forgiving. A murmur spread through the crowd. He's alive, someone whispered. The flame accepted him. Ethan closed his eyes and spoke, his voice steady and full of feeling. I came to your world as a messenger of peace. I did not plan to love anyone here. But your daughter showed me what peace truly means. Not in words, but in the way she sees others, even those unlike herself. If that is wrong, then let the fire take me. The fire flared once more and then faded completely. Ethan stood unharmed in the circle, his clothes untouched, his eyes glowing softly in the morning light. The queen rose to her feet, her mouth slightly open. She could not speak. Her people knelt in silence, for the flame had made its judgment. And high above, on the balcony, Soraya fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face, not from fear but from relief. For the first time, Even the Queen of Varia could not deny what the universe itself had witnessed. The human's heart was pure. The courtyard was silent. The sacred fire had vanished, leaving behind only a faint glow on the marble floor. For a long moment, no one moved. Everyone's eyes were on Ethan, who still stood at the center of the circle, untouched, unharmed, and calm. The Queen of Varia rose slowly from her throne. Her wings unfolded slightly, shimmering with cold silver light. Her voice when she spoke was quiet, almost uncertain. "The trial has spoken," she said. "The fire does not lie." No one dared to interrupt. The great soldiers, the noble ministers, even the high priests all bowed their heads. The Queen's gaze, once sharp as a blade, now softened as she looked at the human before her. Ethan bowed respectfully, his voice humble but strong. "Your Majesty, I did not come here to defy your people. I only wish to bring peace and to remind one soul that she is not alone." The Queen stared at him for a long moment. Her expression was unreadable, but something deep in her heart began to stir, something she thought she had buried long ago. Long before she became queen, she had once loved too. It had been a forbidden love, a soldier from another world, brave and kind. She had let him go for the sake of her throne, but his memory had never left her. It had hardened her heart, made her believe love was weakness. Now, as she looked at Ethan, she saw a reflection of that same courage. Suddenly, a soft sound broke through the silence, the sound of footsteps running. Everyone turned as Princess Soraya rushed forward. She ignored the gasps of the nobles, the disapproving looks of the council, and fell to her knees beside Ethan. "Mother," she cried, her voice trembling, "please, no more trials, no more pain. He has proven himself. He has proven what even fire could not deny." Ethan turned to her, his eyes full of quiet relief. She took his hands gently, as if afraid he would disappear. "You're alive," she whispered, tears falling freely. The Queen looked down at them both, her daughter and the human, their fingers intertwined, their hearts unashamed. For the first time, she did not feel anger. She felt understanding. Her voice softened. "Soraya," she said, "you risked everything for him." "Yes," Soraya said, her voice breaking. "Because he is worth it. Because he saw me as more than my crown. He saw the real me, the one you once wanted me to be, kind, free, alive." The Queen's chest tightened. Her eyes shimmered, though no one dared to mention it. She took a slow breath, her gaze shifting between them. "All my life," she said quietly, "I believed power was safety, that love would make us weak. But perhaps I was wrong." The crowd murmured softly. The Queen raised a hand and silence fell again. She looked at Ethan, her expression now calm, almost gentle. "You spoke truth to me even when it meant your death. Few have ever done that. The fire saw purity in your heart, and I cannot deny it." Then she turned to her daughter. "Soraya, if you choose this path, it will not be easy. There will be those who judge you, who call it wrong. Are you ready for that?" Soraya nodded, tears still shining in her eyes. "If he walks beside me, I can face anything." The Queen closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them again, they were no longer filled with fury, but peace. "Then so be it," she said softly. "Let there be no punishment. Let there be no shame. From this day forward, the human Ethan Ward is a guest of the crown, not a prisoner." A wave of surprise moved through the crowd. Some gasped, others bowed their heads in silent respect. The Queen descended from her throne and placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You reminded me," she said, "that even the strongest hearts can forget how to feel." Ethan bowed deeply. "Thank you, Your Majesty." As the suns climbed higher in the sky, their light fell across the courtyard, warm and golden. The Queen looked at her daughter one last time, and for the first time in many years she smiled. High above them, the wind carried the sound of peace, soft, calm, and full of promise. Days passed after the Queen's judgment, and the palace of Varia slowly returned to calm. Yet something inside its golden walls had changed forever. Where once there had been fear and silence, now there was quiet wonder. The story of the human who survived the sacred fire spread like wind across the empire. Ethan became a name everyone whispered, the man who faced the Queen and lived, the man who loved the princess without fear. Soraya often walked beside him through the palace gardens. The blue flowers that once wilted under the weight of sorrow now bloomed again. The young princess's laughter returned, soft and full of life. For Ethan, each day was like a gift, one he never expected to have. But peace was not easy to keep. Many nobles still disliked the idea of a human walking freely among them. Some called it a disgrace, others feared it would bring weakness to their people. And yet, every time they tried to speak against him, the queen's cold gaze silenced them. She had made her choice. One evening, the queen summoned Ethan to the great balcony that overlooked the twin suns. The sky was painted in deep gold and silver, and the wind was soft. Ethan bowed respectfully. "Your Majesty," he said, "you called for me?" The queen studied him for a long time. "Tell me," she asked, "why did you risk your life that day? You could have run. You could have saved yourself." Ethan looked at the horizon, his eyes thoughtful. "Because she was worth it," he said softly. "And because I wanted to show you, and everyone, that humans can love without limits, that our hearts don't measure blood, power, or race. We only see the soul." For a moment, the queen said nothing. Then slowly she nodded. "You speak like someone who has lost before." Ethan's voice was quiet. "I have. Back on Earth, I lost my family in the wars. I learned that sometimes love is the only thing that gives life meaning." The queen turned her gaze to the sky. "Perhaps I have been blind," she murmured. "I ruled with fear, thinking it would protect my daughter. But you showed me that love can protect her better than any army ever could." She turned back to him, her silver eyes shining with a softness no one had seen in years. "You are still human, Ethan Ward, but to me you are more than that now. You are proof that even the stars cannot divide hearts." Ethan bowed deeply, his chest heavy with emotion. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Behind them, footsteps echoed. Soraya entered the balcony, her face glowing in the evening light. She had heard their words, and her heart swelled with gratitude. She walked toward her mother and took her hand gently. "Thank you for understanding, Mother," she whispered. The queen smiled faintly and touched her daughter's cheek. "Go, my child. Live your life, not the one I tried to write for you." Soraya turned to Ethan, and in that moment their eyes met, two souls from different worlds, united by something older than time. She smiled, and he smiled back. No words were needed. As night fell, the stars began to appear, distant, bright, eternal. The queen stood watching them, whispering softly to herself, "May the universe forgive me for forgetting how to feel." Years later, legends of that day were still told. The people of Varia spoke of the human who had tamed fire and softened a queen's heart. Some said his courage began a new age, one where humans and aliens walked together as equals. And in the royal garden, beneath the twin suns, a statue stood tall, carved from white stone. It showed the alien princess and the human standing side by side, hands joined, faces lifted toward the stars. Below it, a single line was written in both languages. "Love knows no species, only hearts." The children of Varia grew up hearing that line, and every time they looked up at the stars, they remembered the man who dared to walk forward when even gods would have bowed, the man who heard the alien queen roar and answered her with love.